Ready to roll.
Okay, Shulam Aleichem, everybody. Today we're up to Daf Dalid in Shevuos, Masechta Shevuos. We continue from around 10 lines from the top. B'maya Kimta. What did we just establish? The Mishnah. We just established that according to Rabbi Shmuel, it has to be Rabbi Shmuel Ula Malkus. And we said that the chiyuvim in the Mishnah of Shevuos and Tumah of Shtay Shem Narva is concerning Malkus. Why? Because with regard to Shevuos Shala Avar, Shmuel holds it can't be carbon oil of a yored, because there is no carbon oil of a yored by L'sha Avar Achalti V'lo Yachalti. So how could the Mishnah be Rabbi Shmuel? Must be it's L'inyan Malkus. That's what the Gemara said on Daf Gimel. So asks the Gemara, Maris Nagoyim, my Malkus Ika. Once we establish the Mishnah with regard to Chiyuve Malkus, now you have to stay consistent throughout all the cases of Shabbos, Tumah, Shevuos, and Nagoyim. So with regard to Nagoyim, my Malkus Ika, what kind of Malkus is there? There are karbonis when you try to become Tahir, but there is no Malkus. Says the Gemara, you know what? There is a case of Malkus by Nagoyim also. By Kaitzes Bahartai, somebody cuts off his nega. Akarab Oven Amr Beloi, the Amr Oven Beloi, Kol Mokum Shinamar, Shomer Pen Va'al. Anytime it says the Lashon of a Shomer Pen Va'al, Einoi Elo Loisasei. It's a Loisasei. And what does it say by Nagoyim? It says, Hishomer Benegatzeras. Be careful not to cut off the negatzeras. So that is what the Mishnah is referring to when we're talking about Malkus. The Chiyuve Malkus is in such a case. Asks the Gemara, okay, maybe you found me a teretz by Nagoyim, by Yitzias HaShabbos, my Malkus. What kind of Malkus is the by Yitzias HaShabbos? Right? If you do Haitzah or any Malacha, for that matter, on Shabbos, then what do you get? You don't get Malkus. There's Be'edim Vasra, you get Skila. So Lav, Shenitn Lazaras Bisis Bezdenhu, even though there's a Lav, that don't do L'sasachol Malacha, but that Lav is not a Lav that you get Malkus on, it's a Lav that was given as Azhara, that if you violate any of the Malachas, you receive Mrs. Bezdin. V'chol Lav, Shenitn Lazaras Mrs. Bezdin, Ein Loiken Olive, even if the Hasra of the Edom would have been Lamalkus, you don't get Malkus on a Lav, Shenit Lazaras Mrs. Bezdin, which is the L'sasach HaMalach of Shabbos. So how could you tell me that the Mishnah is referring to the Chiyuve Malkus to make sure that it could fit with Rabbi Shmuel? But there is no Malkus by Shabbos. You see Shabbos Shtayim Shenar, but there's no Malkus. Says the Gemara, you're saying there's no Malkus because it's a Lav Shenit Lazaras Mrs. Bezdin. Mishavacha kamakim de Rabbi Shmuel, the Omer Lav Shenit Lazaras Mrs. Bezdin, like an olive. Rabbi Shmuel happens to hold that Lav Shenit Lazaras Mrs. Bezdin is Taka, you do get Malkus, so it stems, it fits with Rabbi Shmuel. Asks the Gemara, Halav Hachi. So if not for this kasha, Kaimike Rabbi Akiva. It sounds like if not for the kasha of Shabbos, that Shabbos is a Lav Shenit Lazaras Mrs. Bezdin, then it could be Rabbi Akiva. We only have to say it's Rabbi Shmuel because of this kasha. What do you mean? Even without this kasha, it can't be Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because kasha Yediyas. We already asked in Daf Gimel that the Mishnah can't come out like Rabbi Akiva. Why not? Because Rabbi Akiva holds that by Tumah, there is no Chiv carbon oil of a Yored by Helam Mikdash V'Kadashav. It's only by Helam Tumah, but not by Helam Mikdash. If you forget that this is the Beis HaMikdash or this is B'sar Kodesh and you eat it knowing that you're Tameh, according to Rabbi Akiva, you don't bring a carbon. And the Shtayim Shen Arba by Tumah, the Arba, the other two is Helam Mikdash V'Kadashav. So it anyways can't be Rabbi Akiva. So Alabachi Kamik Rabbi Akiva, Kasha Yediyas. Anyways, you can't fit it with Rabbi Akiva because of Yediyas. It's not just you can't fit it with Rabbi Akiva because of Shabbos. Two reasons you can't fit the Mishnah with Rabbi Akiva. A, because of Shabbos, because it's Lav Shenit Lazaras Mrs. Bezdin, you can't get Malkus on a Lav of Shabbos. And number two is because the Shtayim Shen Arba by Yediyas Atuma, you won't be able to bring a carbon oil of a Yored when you're referring to Helam Mikdash V'Kadashav. Says the Gemara, Lav Amr Rabbi Shmuel hi Lamalkus. Rabbi Akiva Nami Lamalkus. Just like we answered that the Mishnah can be Rabbi Shmuel and the Chiyuvim in the Mishnah are referring to Malkus, so too according to Rabbi Akiva can also be, if not for the Kasha of Shabbos, Tumah could have fit with Rabbi Akiva as well. How so? Rabbi Akiva also there's no carbon oil of a Yored by Tumah In the case of Hel Mikdash v'Kedoshav, yeah, the chiyuv is Malkus. You still would get Malkus if you walked in Betuma into the Beis Hamikdash, or you ate B'sar Kodesh b'Mezid. So we're talking about a case of Mezid, then it would have been Rabbi Akiva. Says the Gemara, whoa, slow down. Ihachi, if so, that we just established, the Mishnah is like Rabbi Shmuel, and the chiyuvim are chiyuvei Malkus, because we're talking about b'Mezid. And if not for Yitzis HaShabbos, the Kasha of Lav Shenosh Miz Bezdin, it could have been Rabbi Akiva also. And it would have been talking about Malkus b'Mezid. Asks the Gemara, that doesn't fit with the Lashon HaMishnah. Yochi Yediyos. What does it mean, Yediyos Atoma? Hasroyas Meboyalei. When it says Yediyos, it sounds like we're talking about a case of he knew and he forgot. That's the Lashon of Yediyos. But if we're not talking about forgetfulness, we're not talking about a Shoygig Bachlal. We're talking about a Mezid. A Mezid means he never forgot. It was Asra, otherwise he wouldn't get Malchus. So there's Asra, he always knew. So then what's the Lashon Yediyos? Yediyos sounds like he knew and he forgot. Hasrois mibayalei. Someone says, nah, that Lashon is not a kasha. Hole kasha. Tini Yediyos the Hasrois. It means he knew because he Adam warned him because he had a Hasra. The Gemara says, okay, maybe you answered me that problem, but Ihachi is still another issue. Shtain shen arba tartu dahavyan. Why do you tell me by Yediyos atoma? There's a case of Shtain shen arba tartu dahavyan. If you're talking about a shoygig, then I can come up 4 variations of a shoygig, right? We're talking about he forgot in the beginning, or he forgot in the end, or he never remembered, or remembered in the beginning and the end, there was a helam bin time. You have 4 variations of yediyas. That's all in the world of shoygig. But once you're saying the Mishnah is talking about a mezid, there are only 2 cases of mezid. One is you walk b'mezid into the azara, and the other is you eat Basar Kodesh b'mezid. That's the only 2 cases of a mezid with regard to Malkus. So there is no case of Shtayin, Shehein Arba, if we're dealing with Malkus and a mezid. V'su, and more than that, as sheyesh b'yedi batchila v'yedi b'soy v'halam b'ntayim, asks the Gemara, halomo l'malkus mai avidate. What do you mean helam b'ntayim? We're talking about Malkus, talking about Asra. There was no halam over here. So what's the lashon of a halama of a helam b'ntayim? V'su, the Mishnah clearly says, explicitly states, that there's a carbon oil of a yored. If we're really talking about chiyuv malchus, what's a carbon oil of a yored doing in the Mishnah? Elamar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, Rabbi v'nosev la aliba datanai. We're going back. Really, there has to be a shaygig. The whole Mishnah consistently, all the shtaim shen arbas, by Shabbos, by Tumah, by Shevuos, it's all a shaygig. So if it's a shaygig, then the Gemara asked earlier, then it can't be consistent with Rabbi Shmuel, or it can't be consistent with Rabbi Akiva. So here the Gemara answers, Rabbi Elam Rav Yosef Rabbi v'nosev la aliba de tanoi. Rabbi basically learned the Mishnah according to different tanoim. Part of the Mishnah is Rabbi Shmuel, and Tumah is Rabbi Shmuel, and Shevuos is Rabbi Akiva. B'yediyas nosev la b'tuma, it's Rabbi Shmuel, and b'Shevuos nosev la Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rav Ashi, Amritz lo shmaitz kamet Rav Kahana, v'Amar li, loy tema Rabbi nosev la aliba de tanoi, v'lei loy sviralei. Don't think that Rabbi just randomly picked 2 tanoim and learned the Mishnah according to 2 different tanoim, and he himself doesn't agree with those 2 opinions. Elo Rebbe Tamed and Avshem Mefarish. Rebbe himself, in his world, he paskened like Rabbi Akiva by Shevuos, that you're chayiv on Shevuos l'sha'avar. That's why he said Shevuos Shtaim Shen Arba. And he paskened by Tumah like Rabbi Shmuel, and that's why he was able to pasken to say in the Mishnah Yediyas Tumah Shtaim Shen Arba, because he held by Tumah you're chayiv on Hel Mikdash v'Kedashim like Rabbi Shmuel. Now the Gemara is going to try to figure out how do we know Taka that Rebbe paskened like each one respectively, like Rabbi Akiva by Shevuos and like Rabbi Shmuel by Tumah. The Tanya. Minayin she'einoi chayiv elo al sheyesh b'yediyah v'batchila v'yediyah b'soif v'helam b'ntayim. How do I know that a person is only chayiv in a carbon oil v'yored? In a case where he had a yediyah b'tchila, he knew he was tamei, and he had a yediyah b'soif, he remembered afterwards he was tamei, and he had a period where he forgot that he was tamei, and that's when he walked into the azara or yed hagdish. That's the only time he's chayiv in a carbon oil v'yored. How do I know that? Talmud loymar V'nelam shnei pa'amim. It says in the psukim, in the parsha of Tumah, it says the word v'nelam twice. Do we have the pasuk of v'nelam?
In about 10 seconds.
It says, oy nefesh asher tiga b'chol dover tameh.
Here we go.
It says a person will touch any dover tameh, whether it's benivlas chaya tameya, benivlas behema tameya, benivlas sheretz tameh, and it says v'nelam mimenu v'hu tameh, and he forgot that he's tameh. Mamish klar, right? He forgot about himself. He forgot that he was tameh, and what did he do? V'ashem. And he walked into the Azara, he violated Hektish, either by walking into Hektish, into Kodesh, or eating Hektish. Then the halacha is, he brings a carbon oil of a yared. And then it says another v'nelam. Oy, ki yiga batumas odam l'chol tamasa sheyitma ba v'nelam mimenu v'hu yoda v'ashem. It says again, the word v'nelam, it says again over there. So why does it have to say again? Says Rabbi Akiva, from the fact that it says v'nelam twice, it's teaching me, the first v'nelam is teaching, it's only if the halama was on the v'hu tameh, that you're tameh, you forgot that you're tameh. Excluding, forgetting that the Beis HaMikdash, you're walking into the Beis HaMikdash, or you're eating Basar Kodesh, and you knew that you're tameh, but you forgot about the chayfetz, the area that you walked into. That wouldn't require a carbon. That wouldn't be subject to a carbon. It's only if you forgot that you're tameh. That's the first v'nelam. And the second v'nelam is teaching me v'nelam v'hu yoda. It says in the second v'nelam. So Rabbi Akiva says it's like as if it says v'hu yoda first, he knew, and then v'nelam, and then he forgot. So he had a yediyah batchila, then he forgot. V'ashem. Obviously, he must have remembered. Otherwise, there's no carbon out of the yared. So you see, you need a yediyah batchila, you need a yediyah b'saif, and that's the only time the halam is that you're tameh, and that's the only time you bring a carbon oil of a yared. That's Rabbi Akiva's shita. Right? That's Rabbi Akiva, that you don't bring a carbon unless you had a yediyah that you're tameh, you forgot, and then you remembered. Rabbi Yomer einat tzarech. No. The emes is, there's an extra v'nelam. The second v'nelam is extra. Why? Because Harei Yomer, it says already, v'hu v'nelam mechlal de yoda. It already says v'nelam. So once it says v'nelam, including in the word v'nelam, I already know that he knew. V'nelam, pashtus means he knew and he forgot. That's what v'nelam means. So mechlal de yoda. So v'hu yoda, and then it says again, meferish v'hu yoda, harekan shtei yediyah. So in the v'nelam, there's already included a yediyah. So that's one yediyah. And then it says v'hu yoda, that's a second yediyah. Harekan shtei yediyahs. So in came out Talmud Leiber v'nelam. Why do we need a second v'nelam? L'chayev al helam tuma v'al helam mikdash v'kedashav. So here in the second v'nelam, it's marba that it doesn't just mean if you forget that you're tameh. Let's say you remembered your tameh all along, but you forgot that this is the mikdash or this is basar kodesh. That would also be subject to carbon oil v'yored. So here you see Rebbe with regard to tumah holds like Rabbi Shmuel. So when Rebbe establishes the Mishnah like Rabbi Shmuel, it's not just because he picks Rabbi Shmuel out of the hat, out of a box, and says, I'm going to learn the Mishnah like a random Rabbi Shmuel. Rebbe himself holds like that. He argues in Rabbi Akiva. He says that you're chayav a carbon oil of a yored, even when you remembered your tamei all along, you just forgot that this is the mikdash, this is basar kodesh. So therefore, when he says yediyas atum shtayim she'en arba, it's according to l'taim of the nafshei. He's saying his own opinion. That's how he holds. So Gemara says ashkram b'yediyas the islay time of the nafshei. Oh, so now you found me that Rebbe himself taka holds like Rabbi Shmuel, and he argues in Rabbi Akiva. But Shevuos, the less the time of nafshei menolan, how do I know by Shevuos that he holds like Rabbi Akiva? That you're chayiv even l'sha'ovar she'achalti v'shelo yachalti, and that's why it says Shevuos Shtayim She'en Arba. Another way to say it, so Gemara says svaru. It's a svara. We'll see in a moment what the svara is. Lishna achrina, another lashon in how to ask this question. There's no enough community between the two lashonos, just a different wording. Ashkechen b'yediyas the savalak Rabbi Shmuel. I see by yediyas that Rabbi holds like Rabbi Shmuel, like we just proved in the previous brisa. But b'shavua is the savalak Rabbi Akiva by Shevuos, that he holds like Rabbi Akiva. That if he says Shavua she'achalti b'shelo yachalti, you're also chayiv. You chayiv a carbon if you violate that Shavua b'shoigig. So how do I know Manola? And how do I know that Rabbi himself holds like that as well? Says the Gemara Svara, it's a Svara. What is the Svara? How do we know Rabbi holds like Rabbi Akiva? Because Rabbi Akiva might time become a chayiv l'sha'ovar. How does Rabbi Akiva know by Shavuos that you're chayiv a Shevuos shelo echalti v'shelo echalti. You're chayav a carbon if you're over on those Shevuos l'sha'ovar. The darish rebuya yomeute, because Rebbe darshans riboy and miyat and a riboy. We'll see later. Mirza Hashem on Daf Chavov, Daf Chazayin, the Gemara is nariches what the riboy, miyat and riboy. It says nefesh kisi shova, which is a riboy, means stam shvu. It's not specifying exactly how you articulated the shvua. And then it says the miyat of lahara or lahetev, which is specifics lahaba. And then it says l'choila shiyivat odem b'shvua. So you have the miyat package in between two ribuyim, and the klal is riba miyat and riba hakoil, and that's why even shvua she'achalti v'shelo echalti l'shavar is also chayiv. So if that's Rabbi Akiva's svara, so now I know Rebbe holds like Rabbi Akiva, because Rebbe Nami Darish Riboy Mute. Rebbe in Kol HaTorah Kula also darshans Riboy and Miyat and Riboy. So obviously would agree to Rabbi Akiva's drasha. How do I know that Rebbe darshans Riboy, Miyat and Riboy? The Tanya will let the Brisa. Rebbe Rabbi Kol Poed B'Chayr Odem B'Chutz Min HaShtaros. When it comes to Pidyon Ben, you can give to the Kohen the value of Chamesh Shkolim, whatever you owe him, except Chutz Min HaShtaros, except you have an IOU, somebody owes you Chamesh Shkolim, you can't just transfer that Chayv to the Kohen and fulfill your obligation of Pidyon with that shtar. Chachamim limit it even more. They say you can't be Poida with avodim, shtoros, and kakos. My time with the Rebbe, what's the machlikas over between Rebbe and the Chachamim? Because Rebbe Darshan's Dorish Rebuya Meuti, Rebbe Darshan's Riba Miyat. There's a Riba if Duyav Men Chodesh Ribo, Be'erkech HaKesef Chamesh Shkola Miyat, Tivda Chasav Riba. So you have a Miyat Riba and Riba, Miyat Riba HaKoil. My Riba, Kol Milay, and my Miyat Shtaros. There's only the Miyat and Shtaros, but everything else is Nesraba from the two Ribuyim. V'Rabbanan Darshi Klali Prati. And the Rabbanan are Doirish Klala Prat. They take the same words and they have a different way of darshaning it, the way it's called Klala Prat. Of a duyav men chodesh klal. Be'ercha kesach mesh prat. Tiv the chazav kolal. Klala prat the klal. Iyatadon eloke ena prat. So here you use the klalim that are surrounding the prat, and you use the prat to redefine the two klalim that it's that surrounds the prat. So ma prat. Ma prat mefurish davar mataltel v'gufei mamoin. I've called davar mataltel v'gufei mamoin. Yotzu kakoyes she'ena mataltelen. Yotzu avod meshukish l'kakoyes. Yotzu shtoris afish mataltelen gufei mamoin. So here, depending how you look at the ifduyav, the generalization of ifduyav, and then be'erkecha kesef chamesh shkolim, which is the specifics in the pasuk, and then you have another generalization of tifta. Do you use the way of riba miyat and riboy, and then it's riba akoil, and you're only mamayit one thing, or do you use the way of drasha of klal prat klal, which would mean that the prat redefines the entire klal, and then you're being mamayit much more, because you have to match the prat, the characteristics of the prat, which is davar matatl v'gufay mammon. But what do you see from here? The Rebbe uses the mechanism, the drasha, the way of riba miyat and riboy. And once we see Rebbe uses by Pidyon Ben the drasha of riba miyat and riboy, so now you know that when it comes to Shevuos, and Rabbi Akiva has a riba miyat and riboy to include Shevuos l'sha'avar, the Rebbe agrees to Rabbi Akiva. That's the svara. Says the Gemara, Amar le'Ravina la'meimar, Rebbe Dorish Rebuya Yemuute. Is it true? You found me by Pidyon Ben the Rebbe Darshan is Rebuya Yemuute. Asks the Gemara, is that true? Rebbe Kloli Prati Darish. We find that Rebbe B'derech Klal doesn't resort to the way of Riba Miyat in Kol HaTorah Kula. He really resorts to Klal Prat. How do I know that? The Tanya Martzeya by an Eved Ivri that wants to stay. After his time is up, he wants to stay by the Odni. He says a Hafti is Adoini. Ves Ishti Ves Bonai. Right? He wants to stay. It's tremendous Aveira. What do you mean you want to stay? The Rebbe says, Klibnei Yisrael Avodim. Oizen Zu Sheshama Bar Sinai. Klibnei Yisrael Avodim. You have to take him Venasata Ozne Badeles, and you have to drill into his ear, into Martzeya, until you have to teach him a lesson. There's like a sort of einish. Always bothered me. Because I always felt that the Eved Ivri is kind of an honorable man. He's a family man. He says, I love my wife and kids. Like, what's wrong with that, you know? Can't take his wife and kids with him because the Odin has a right to give him a Shevche Kananis, so he married a Shevche Kananis. Shevche Kananis stays by the Odin with all the kids. So he loves his wife. He says, Haftis Ishti, Vesbonai. Like, why should he be punished for that? Imagine a guy should abandon his family. He seems to be an honorable man. The teretz is, in the Torah it says, take a look carefully at the words. He says, Ahafti es adoini. Look what he puts first. He doesn't put his wife and kids first. Ahafti es adoini ves ishti ves banai. He wants this odin. He loves the comforts that the odin brings to him. Because we know that kalakaina eved kekaina odin, right? He has to be treated with tremendous sensitivity and respect and thoughtfulness. So he wants to stay by this odin. That's the Aveira. The Aveira wants to stay by the odin. So therefore, what do we do? V'nasata ba'oznoi ubadelas. Take a martzeya and you put it into the oizn. Martzeya. Ein dela martzeya. Menayim the rabbis soil. V'asira machad v'makdech v'machteb. All the other tools that can penetrate. Talmud loymar that can puncture his ear. Talmud loymar lakachta. Kol davar shenilkach biyad. Divri besi Rabbi Yehuda. It says lakachta generalization. Rabbi Yomer martzeya ma martzeya miyuchad shal matechas avkol shal matechas. From a minute of Micah Miflagi, it has to be from metal, because martzeya is from metal. And the minute of Micah Miflagi, Rabbi Darsh klal prati. Rabbi Darsh is the klal prat. Klal is martzeya, and the prat is the klal is velakachto, right? And then it says martzeya, which is a prat, and then you have Venasato, another klal. So you have the prat sandwiched in between the two klalim, so that prat defines the klal, but it has to be similar in the way of the matzeh, which is mateches. And Rabbi Yossi really darish Ribi Miyuta, and Rabbi Yossi darshans Ribi Miyuta, and since he darshan Ribi Miyuta, so he says, the only miyat we have is the miyat of what's he being mamayit? Not sure what he's being mamayit, but certainly he's being marba every other keli, because he doesn't hold of the derech of klal prat to klal. Oh, here he brings from Rashi, based on the Gemara in Kedushin, he's mamayit sam charif, like a very sharp sam that can penetrate his ear. So that is the miyat. But other than that, any tool, you can use any tool. First Rashi, up. So that's the miyat. Anyway, what do you see from here? You see from here the Rebbe Darshan's klal prat klal. So how can you tell me Rebbe Darshan's riboy and miyat and riboy, and that's why the svar is agrees to Rabbi Akiva, who learns from riboy and miyat riboy, the shvula sha'ovar, chalti v'shaloi chalti, and you bring a raya from Pidyon Ben. Okay, but what about over here? Over here by Mertzeya, you see Rebbe uses the way of klal prat klal. If you use klal prat klal, you can't be married by shvula sha'ovar. So the Gemara says, "En." Truth is, ba'alma klal prat darish. Truth is, kol ha'torah kula Rebbe resorts to klal prat. Over here by Pidyon Ben is different. It says b'mayim twice. Yeah. And ein zeh klal prat el riba umiyat. There's some place that you don't darshan klal prat. You have to darshan riba umiyat. Even if you darshan b'chol ha'torah kula klal prat, some places you have to darshan riba umiyat. Why? Because in those places, the klolim are next to each other, the prat is at the end. So when do you say klal prat to klal? When the prat is sandwiched in between the two klolim. But when the prat is after the two klolim, like in the case of simone tahira of fish and shrotzim that grow in the water, and the Torah says, Zet toichlu mekolesh b'mayim, and it says, b'mayim twice, and then it says, b'yamim v'necholim, the prat afterwards. So in such a case, where the prat comes after the two klolim, there we say, you don't say klal prat, you say riba emiyat. And the same is true by Pidyon Ben as well. The reason why by Pidyon Ben, Rebbe Darshan's riboy emiyat, is because by Pidyon Ben, the pasuk has both klolim before the prat. It says, if duya ben chodesh tifta, and then it says kesef chamesh shkalim. So in those cases, there's an exception. You have to darshan riba yamiyat, not klal prat, because it's not in the proper order. So the Gemara says, Rabbanon. So if the Rabbanon are chaylik and Rebbe Pidyon Ben, they say you do say klal prat. How can they say klal prat? The two klolim are before the prat. It's not sandwiched in between the klolim. Ravina Kadamri Marov, Kol Mokr Tamitz Shtei Klol Samuch Zelzel, Hotel Prat Beinein, Viduna Bechlal Prat. Yeah, you could put the prat in between the klalim. Hashta the Amrit Rebbe Klala Prat Darish. But now that we come to the conclusion that Rebbe darshans klala prat b'chala terekula, and he only darshans riba yamiyat in specific cases when the klolim are next to each other and the prat is afterwards. Here, bal karchach kasha Shevuos. So now you can't tell me that Rebbe learns riba yamiyat by Shevuos the same way Rebbe Akiva darshans riba yamiyat. Because over there, Rebbe would darshan a klala prat. If you darshan a klala prat, then you wouldn't be able to be marba Shevuos l'sha'avar. So how could Rebbe agree with Rabbi Akiva? He doesn't use Rabbi Amiyat in that pasuk. Ela Shevuos nasev al libed Rabbi Akiva v'leila svirlei. By Shevuos it's different. Shevuos taka, when he mentions Shevuos shtayim shenar, but the first line in our Masechta in our Mishnah, he taka himself, Rebbe himself doesn't hold like that, because Rebbe doesn't darshan Rabbi Amiyat. In order to be marbe Shevuos l'sha'avar, the other two of she'achalti v'shelo yachalti, there you'll need the drasha of Rabbi Amiyat. The only way to be able to darshan that is Rebbe Amiyat. The Rebbe doesn't darshan Rebbe Amiyat. He only darshans klala prat, right? So Mamela, that line will be according to Rabbi Akiva, but he himself, Rebbe, Lei Lois Svila, doesn't hold like that.